Fox News' hypocritical media analysis doesn't get any worse than right-wing Liz Trotta from the conservative Washington Times. Here she lets all her partisanship show as she attacks the liberal media for not being champions of her traditional views on marriage. To her and apparently Fox News, that's bias. Obviously, the recent ruling striking down California's Proposition 8 is at the heart of Liz's discontent. Judge Vaughn Walker earns an activist label for not taking a conservative stance on this. Did I mention he was a Bush appointee opposed by gay rights groups when he was appointed back in 1987? I better, because Liz Trotta and the piddle anchor interviewing her sure won't. Let me run some of the tape to expose Liz's bullcrap for what it is.
It's amazing to read the opinion, and I have. This is a portion of it in the New York Times in an editorial called "Marriage is a Constitutional Right." And let me just quote from the Times editorial. The exclusion of same-sex couples from marriage, quote, exists as an artifact of a time when the genders were seen as having distinct roles in society and marriage, he wrote. Quote, that time has passed. Oh, well, maybe we didn't all get the memo, but I was under the impression that we still had two genders in this country.
Liz claims to have read the decision, but her partisan vomit doesn't fit very well with the actual tone and content of the decision. How do I know? I read it too. If you want the truth, not Fox News' typical outright lies, half-truths, and right-wing spin, you can find a link to it on my blog. In the meantime, you can get this larger context of what she's quoting. Judge Vaughn Walker is reviewing the evidence presented at the trial. I quote in detail from the decision on my blog, but to summarize, he's referring here to the defense's only witness addressing the government's interest in marriage, David Blankenhorn. David Blankenhorn puts forth a narrow definition of marriage being for the purpose of procreation. While this sounds like common sense at first, it's so narrow it excludes many heterosexual couples who cannot have children, have no interest in having children, or both. Odd, Liz doesn't mention any of this, nor Fox's piddle anchor.
But Justice Walker, who, by the way, is openly gay, and a fact that is not that is just glossed over in most of the coverage of liberal media, so supposedly he couldn't possibly have a vested interest in this case. And what he basically does is does away with the gender issue, as is explained in the coverage, and then takes on the whole question of how special homosexuals are, and therefore they should have homosexual marriage. The one thing that they do emphasize is that Proposition 8, which was overwhelmingly 52% approved by the voters, and which said that same-sex marriage should not be allowed in this state, that was completely overruled. And what was more important in the reaction in the media was that their dreams have been fulfilled, that these homosexual activists are indeed a very special group. And yes, they did need to feel good about themselves. This was completely emphasized all the way through the coverage.
Well, Liz, let me ask you, you mentioned the Judge Vaughn Walker, and the fact that he is openly gay. You didn't hear that mentioned in a lot of media reports, but the ones that did said it should have no factor at all. It shouldn't be mentioned in the reporting. It shouldn't be considered in the analysis. How do you respond?
Well, of course, this is the usual message. You have the usual answer you would get. But what you had here, and what is missing from the coverage, is that you have a small group of people, a minority, maybe 2% of the country, who have found a constitutional basis, are still in search of a constitutional basis, to upend millennia of tradition on what marriage is between one man and one woman.
Would Liz object to a black judge ruling in a civil rights case? Mull over that a minute, then ponder this. Does anyone doubt Liz would have no problem with a happily married heterosexual man or woman with children who shared her pew ruling on this case? Pardon the pun here, but the only straight point she makes is a majority of Americans don't support gay marriage, according to a roughly year-old CNN poll I dug up. However, that poll points out to a trend I've even heard conservatives this week outside of Fox News acknowledge. The older the person is, the less likely they are to support it. Attitudes are changing, and it's a matter of time before the majority shifts the other way. Liz and her poodle didn't mention that either. I know you're suitably shocked.